course, the crowd wants Reed to go for it. Wouldn't be surprised if he did on 4th down and 1.
So, anyways, with that, time yours.
Welcome to 4th and 1. I'm Todd Palmer, joined by Nick Jacobs, and it was an unconventional game, but the Kansas City Chiefs got it done in some cold weather, snapped the curse of the Cincinnati Bengals, and are heading to their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years. After a 23-20 win Sunday at Arrowhead Stadium. First of all, I got to give a shout out to the fans because there were a lot of Bengals fans there, but they really drowned out the Chiefs Kingdom really drowned them out. And I'm telling you, man, when the walk from the from the stadium back to my car after the game was absolutely frigid. The wind was whipping. It took like 30 minutes after I got home to get some feeling back in my toes. So salute to everybody who was out there. The atmosphere was great. You wouldn't have known that, it was single digit wind chills out there, with the noise they were making. And the players by and large said that, that it made a difference. But I don't know about you. I was very impressed with what Patrick Mahomes was able to do. Given the circumstances, but I was equally impressed by the pass rush. Which do you think was a bigger factor? The tone the pass rush was able to set right off the bat, or just the grit Mahomes showed throughout the game?
I would say the biggest one's obviously the pass rush, because as we talked about in the previous podcast, the magic number was 5 sacks because Burrow was 0-3 the previous 3 times that happened this year.
Did they get there?
They did. Chris Jones did in the final minute there in the 4th quarter to get to 5 sacks on Burrow.
It was, so I was sitting next to sports director Mick Schaefer, and the Chiefs, look, there were a lot of wasted opportunities, right? Like Jalen Watson gets the pick late in the 2nd quarter, and then they had 3 straight incompletions and ended up punting before the 2-minute warning, give up a 90-yard drive. So instead of it maybe being 16-3 at halftime, it's 13-6. Then they don't do anything with the second half kickoff. There's another interception later in the game where they didn't do anything with it. I mean, it definitely had a feeling like a game where the Chiefs had largely been in control, but then missed some opportunities when the Bengals gave it to them and just let them keep hanging around. But I remember, because Mick kept saying, "Oh, it just feels like last year." And I remember they'd already gone downstairs by this point. But when Chris Jones got that sack there in the 4th quarter, I remember thinking, "Well, that's not like last year." He finished that one off, and then, look, I mean, I think there was a theme this week about redemption, at least from the Chiefs' point of view, having lost those 3 games. And then that last 30 seconds was about redemption. I mean, it was about Sky Moore with the 29-yard punt return to get him to midfield. Mahomes with the scramble, not really redemption there, but then Butker, who had a tough season, hitting that 45-yarder into the wind, to essentially win it there with 3 seconds left. I thought it was an impressive win all the way around. In terms of the mettle the Chiefs showed, when you consider that, Kadarius Toney, McCole Hardman Jr., and Juju Smith-Schuster all went down. L'Jarius Sneed went down on the first drive for that defense. I mean, there was a lot working against the Chiefs, but they found a way.
Yeah, I mean, the first point that I'll start out with is Steve Spagnuolo did a good job confusing Joe Burrow. There was some looks that they were giving, some rotations they were making that he was struggling with, and it helped lead to some inaccurate passes, a couple interceptions, and also just the pass rush and how they were able to get him protection-wise a handful of times there. The Chiefs took advantage of them having 3 starters out along the offensive line, and it went a long way to kind of setting the tempo early in that regard. I think where the Chiefs struggled offensively is I think they were expecting to have better success against B.J. Hill and D.J. Reader in interior-wise, and I think also part of it was probably Mahomes' ankle, if I'm making an assumption. some of the stretch runs that they would do, and some of those, and some of that where they'd kind of stretch the defense out a little bit more and attack more off tackle. I don't know if they wanted to kind of put Mahomes' ankle through that on a regular basis this game, and I think they kind of steered clear of that because I think that's where they would have had more success instead of trying to run in the interior. And I'm not knocking them on it. If that's what if that's what they have to sacrifice to get to a Super Bowl and to keep Patrick Mahomes as healthy as possible in a Super Bowl, like, I mean, I'm not going to knock them on that part of it. But like you said there with what Mick felt like there, I probably felt the same way at that. I know I felt the same way at that time. Because when Mahomes had that ball slip out of his hand, like, man, that had flashbacks to Kelsey from earlier this year all over again. You're like, dude, like, that 1 in a million times that's going to happen. And it happens, of course, in a Chiefs playoff game. And you're like, boy, man, I don't know. Is this going to turn the tide like it did? And they went down and scored. And then you're like, oh, boy. And then that 4th and 6 that they were really aggressive on. Like, there's just those little nuances and little instances where you're just like, yo, man, here it is. But, I mean, look, in the grand scheme of it, I mean, there were a lot of players when injuries were happening, like you were talking about, that really, really stepped up. All the rookies stepped up in their own ways and made some really key contributions throughout that game. Offensive line stepped up there as long as they could until the Bengals started bringing some of the blitzes and trying to make them guess a lot more than what they did. And the crazy thing is, from watching the game, I honestly think Patrick Mahomes, a healthy Patrick Mahomes, I think they might have scored on every drive if he was healthy, because not being able to have that ability to move around in the pocket and take off running a handful of times and all that type of stuff, all those aspects of it, I think, really kind of limited what the offense could do. And they played within the structure that they had available to them and the framework that they could with his ankle and what he felt comfortable with and everything. So, I mean, still, it was like you said, with how cold the temperatures were out there, how frigid, as you say, it was. Imagine playing out in that game for 4 quarters. I mean, and some of those injuries that happened were because of how hard those hits are against that type of cold. So, I mean, there's that aspect to it too that wasn't lost on me personally.
Well, and Kadarius Toney looked like he kind of tripped and then dug his foot in awkwardly. McCole Hardman got bent over, but I thought he was effective before that. Andy seemed to indicate that Juju re-injured his knee, and he was limping pretty good coming off the field for the ceremony when he headed to the locker room after the game. Good news is they got 2 weeks to get ready before they've got to play the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think a lot of people are already dubbing it the Kelsey Bowl. I think that's, look, Andy Reid has, coached more than a decade at for both franchise. I think you've got to include Reid in there somewhere. Whether, barbecue versus cheesesteak bowl, something like that. But one thing I don't want to get lost is, we all thought that the Chiefs were going to have to establish the run, right? And do something. They had 20 carries for 42 yards. They weren't able to get Jerick McKinnon involved, in the offense, that's not to say he didn't have an impact. Right. He did in pass protection. He did have a couple receptions for 17 yards. I think it was the first or second quarter. He stonewalled Logan Wilson on a delayed blitz. And I'm looking forward to seeing that on the All-22 when it's available later this week. But Mahomes went out and completed 29 of 43 for 326 yards with 2 touchdowns. And he looked like the far superior quarterback in this one. I was really worried that, back a month and a half ago in that game in Cincinnati, and some of the guys alluded to it this week, Joe Burrow looked almost flawless. That offense was humming. And I think that the Chiefs rattled him early. Give credit to Frank Clark. Mike Dana collapsed in the pocket and Frank Clark finishing him off early. I think that set the tone and got into Joe Burrow's head early that, hey, the offensive line might struggle, and hey, but he didn't. he'd never really looked completely comfortable reading reading the defense and seeing the field. There were a couple breakdowns, don't get me wrong. I mean, the 3rd and 16 to Hayden Hurst there in the fourth quarter when it looked like the Chiefs were playing sticks coverage, but there were 3 guys who were all, 2 yards too deep and gave up the conversion. I mean, the Chiefs they made mistakes, but this was like the flu game, Michael Jordan's flu game, I think. Patrick Mahomes, hobbled as he was, no run game to help him, and he just had to go out there and, and show what he was made of. And boy, did he ever.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is from a Mahomes perspective. I mean, look, there's 2 guys, obviously. I mean, there's a handful of guys, but I mean, Mahomes gritting through what he had to in that regard. I mean, that was a key aspect of it. McKinnon and some of the tight ends, the way they would help Chip and kind of hang out there to help out Orlando Brown, or if they needed to occasionally help Wiley, they were doing that and helping kind of sacrifice a route that they could use down and kind of be more of a release and check down in that regard. So, I mean, the Chiefs sacrificed when they had to in terms of the overall scheme and what they were doing. So, I mean, it wasn't going to be pretty, wasn't going to be amazing, but at the end of the day, Mahomes and Valdez-Scantling finally got on the same page. And, it was the perfect time for them to be on the same page with how many injuries there were and what was going on. And I mean, they had themselves quite a day. And if Valdez-Scantling's not out there, the Chiefs don't win that game. Like they may not win that game just simply because of that. But yeah, it did, and just the amount of injuries they had at receiver. The Chiefs need all those 2 weeks to get as many people healthy as possible.
Well, and Justin Watson was inactive because of an illness. Like to think that that'll resolve itself in the next 2 weeks. But we'll wait and see on Tony, Hardman, and Juju. Out of those 3, which one would you most want to be healthy for the Super Bowl?
Tony would be great, and Juju would be great as well. I mean, those 2 you're going to need. Hardman, I mean, look, Hardman was out of it when he was on the field. Like you can tell he's been gone for months on end because he didn't have the feel for it that he had whenever he left in that Titans game, or he got hurt in that Titans game, and he didn't have the same vision that he had a hesitancy to him that he didn't have before, and so it was you could tell. Like, I mean, he was very rusty, and that's to be expected given how long he was away from it and everything. So, I mean, we'll see what happens here in the coming weeks. I mean, but that the fact that knee injury had popped up, like I can't remember if it was during camp or early on in the year for Juju, and then for it to kind of pop up again this week and for him to aggravate it in the game today, that's something that you kind of monitor and keep tabs on, because with him hitting free agency, like that's a decision you're gonna have to make in terms of how much you financially want to invest in that more than 1 year deals, if that's gonna be a continuing thing.
Yeah, I think you got to hope Julie Freimeyer can do the job that she did on Patrick's ankle on Juju Smith-Schuster's knee. But I do want to give a shout out to Rick Burkholter and his staff, Julie Freimeyer being one of them. Between Mahomes' ankle, and he said, he gave Julie a lot of credit. And then Travis Kelce's back, that spasmed a bit there. And he was, I don't know if game time decision is the right way to phrase it, but he was definitely very questionable for that game. And lots of other guys banged up, nicked up this time of year. The training staff did a great job, keeping those folks around. L'Jarius Sneed, that's a big loss for that defense to have, their most veteran corner go down on the first drive. And then essentially you're left with, Jalen Watson, Trent McDuffie, and Joshua Williams, 3 rookies, holding it down for most of the way from then on. Plus Brian Cook, a rookie, safety thrown in the mix there, who was called on a lot in coverage. For them to hold up the way that they did, Joe Burrow only had 270 yards. The offense only had 309 yards total for the Bengals. It's hard not to be impressed by the job that the defense did. Who do you think stood out the most in your mind, though? I feel like it's got to be Chris Jones.
Yeah, Chris Jones is the most dominant player on either defense at that for that game. He was getting
arguably the most dominant player on the field. Period.
He was getting held on most plays. He was getting double teamed. And he fought through it, and he kept trying to collapse the pocket and create pressure. And he was a man on a mission. And they needed him in the biggest moments possible. He came through when he needed to, and he had a massive game for the national audience to see just how good he is and where he's at this point in his career. So that was a massive game for him to get that next contract. So, it came at the right time.
Listen, the last sack, I think, Chris Jones has talked about being motivated all offseason by not getting the job done, not finishing last year in the AFC Championship game. But I think the sum total of that effort that he put in, and some of it may be driven by one that next payday, but the sum total of that effort combined with Joe Cullen's tutelage, I think came together perfectly on that last sack when he lined up as at defensive tackle, and then he ends up bumping outside. And he talked about seeing the play and remembering a similar coverage they'd given him earlier in the game, and feeling like if he bumped outside on that one, he could get a one-on-one with the tackle or the tight end instead of taking a double team on the inside. And it worked out. He got the one-on-one he wanted. He got to Joe Burrow. He got him on the ground this time, and they had to punt, and then Sky Moore, Patrick Mahomes, and Harrison Butker did the rest from there. But to me, that just encapsulated the growth he's shown in his season all in one. I think he's not only grown in terms of intelligence. I think last year not getting to the Super Bowl made him hungry again. And that's one of the things that we talked about. Maybe last year they needed guys to be hungry again. But I think Patrick with the doubters when it came to Tyreek, I think Chris Jones, when he didn't feel like he finished last year, I think some of those guys found an internal hunger that drove them a little bit this year. And it all came together. And we'll have time to talk about the Eagles, because I think that's a different animal down the road. But
get 2 whole weeks.
But it's hard. If the secondary can hold up the way that they did and just keep battling. I think about Brian Cook, bang play on Hayden Hurst. They flag him for defensive pass interference. He gets beat on that 4th and 6 play to open the fourth quarter you're talking about, when Joe Burrow just kind of chucked it up, to Jamar Chase. But then there in the fourth quarter when they needed a play, they go to T. Higgins, and this time Brian Cook gets his head around earlier, tips the ball away. Joshua Williams intercepts it. It ends up effectively being like a punt, right? But still, I think the defense always gets a little bit more geared up when they get a turnover than just maybe force a punt there. I think that has an impact on the psyche of the defense, and certainly on a rookie like Brian Cook in that situation. We talked about you need to see whether these young guys, the battles they went through in the regular season, would it pay off? And I think it did in terms of resilience in this one.
The biggest thing I'm excited about for all the rookies that were able to play in this game and be a part of it, I think it opened their eyes to just how different it is, what the intensity level is, why you're playing in those moments, why you're in those moments, what it takes to win those moments and be able to get to Super Bowl. I mean, those guys are rookies in the NFL, and guess what? They're doing something they're doing something in 2 weeks that some guys that played in the league 12, 13, 14, 15 years never got to experience and play in a Super Bowl. And like they're doing it in their rookie year. So they will always be able to say no matter what, they won an AFC championship and they got to play in a Super Bowl till the end of time. Like that's the one thing that they've, that they got blessed with in that regard. So it'll be really I'm just glad that they got that experience because I think it'll do wonders for all those guys next year in terms of how they prepare off season, how they approach games, and kind of how they continually raise their level in their game down the road. And that's why that for them to all make the contributions that they did in the AFC Championship game in their own ways was like that was so huge. And like each one had a piece of it and had a part of it, as Coach Reed would say. So I mean, look, I mean that in itself, I mean that's a tribute to them. And like I said, the offensive line, man. I mean, look, they did what they could protection wise until the Bengals started blitzing, and then the Chiefs tried to chip a little bit to answer, and then they, at that point, Mahomes had to take off a couple times. But from where that offensive line was a week ago, and at various points in the season, and to be as one-dimensional as they ended up having to be because of the ineffectiveness they were going to have against the defensive tackles for Cincinnati, like there was each person stepped up in their own way. And I don't think it all had to deal with the Cincinnati Mayor or Burrowhead or whatever, motivation that they got. It was, they all earned their Super Bowl trip.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Joe Burrow was asked about it and said, yeah, this is what makes football fun when talking about all the chirping, the Burrowhead comments, all that kind of stuff. And it does. That kind of stuff is great for, those of us in the media and fans to kind of talk about it. It almost reminds me of like Muhammad Ali and the pre-fight smack talk, and stuff like that to kind of drive interest and engagement. But when they lined up at 5:40 and they kicked off, like none of that stuff mattered. None of that stuff is why the Chiefs won, but it did provide an all-time great soundbite from Travis Kelce when he yelled to the Cincinnati mayor, "Know your role and shut your mouth." Yeah, that was a good moment. That was a lot of fun for everyone at Arrowhead, and me, frankly, Nick Jacobs. I'm going to use that. Know your role and shut your mouth.
I mean, not on me. You're not going to, but I mean, you can use.
We'll see, sir. We'll see.
All right, calm down, Rock. This isn't the Royal Rumble, okay? We're not setting up a promo for WrestleMania. Simmer down.
Simmer down now. But I just thought I think it did. This is obviously not the Chiefs and Bengals are going to play again next year because they both won their division. I think they're going to play a lot down the road. I don't know if the Bengals are going to be as chirpy. Now that the Chiefs have popped him back in the mouth at least once.
I don't know. I still think they will be.
They might be. But you also got to remember. There's they got to start paying the piper with respect to some of the guys on their roster this offseason and moving forward. It's going to be hard to keep that same group around. It'll be interesting to see. And look, the Tyler Boyd injury, I think, was a big one too. We talked a lot about the Chiefs injuries, but losing Tyler Boyd made a big difference because he was a guy who made a lot of plays on third down. But I think Patrick Mahomes showed this year that it doesn't really matter who you have around him, because I don't think he's got any great wide receivers right now. I'm like Tyreek Hill, I think, is a future Hall of Famer. I'm not sure there's a future Hall of Famer at the wide receiver position on this roster. I'm not even sure there's a guy you could make a strong case for being on anywhere near that kind of trajectory. But Mahomes can just do some things that other guys can't do. he's a unicorn. We've been saying it for years, but he's a unicorn, and he keeps showing it. And Brian Cook had a great line when I was talking to him after the game, and he said, look, Pat showed everybody what he was all about. And then he corrected himself. He said he reminded everybody who he is. And the question that is going to be answered in the next couple of years is Joe Burrow really on that level? Because they're not going to be able to keep T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon and Hayden Hurst and Tyler. The band's going to break up. They're going to lose guys, just like the Chiefs have through the years. Okay. Can Joe Burrow continue to elevate when his bank account is a little bit fatter, but the skill level at his around him is a little bit diminished? We'll find out. We'll find out if he can really elevate this to a Brady versus Manning type thing, or whether he's just going to be another guy that once came for the throne and ultimately could not quite snatch it away from Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, and that I mean, look, I mean, in my opinion, Mahomes Burrow is going to be the next Manning Brady. Like, I mean, that's what that's going to be. As long as those two guys are healthy, they're going to be a primetime game on Sunday or Monday night or that Thursday night to kick off the season. If they both have the success that they're capable of as teams, like that's just going to be a part of that. Hopefully, a decade's worth of great matchups between the two of those quarterbacks. So, in that aspect of it, like, I mean, this is this isn't the end of the Bengals. Trying to take the Chiefs' throne or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I fully expect them to be back in a position next year to be able to do that. I mean, because let's be honest, like you said, with Tyler Boyd being out, that took away so much of their middle of the field that they were able to exploit. And so you just, at that point, you're like, okay, we can double chase every play now, try to figure out if we need to double T. Higgins, and then, try to go from there mentally is what they're thinking in their minds probably. And then they adjusted accordingly to there. But yeah, not having that third receiver made a huge difference for what Bengals offense could do. And obviously, like I said, not having the three offensive linemen, that hurt as well. So, I memean, I wouldn't be stunned if Cincinnati's not telling themselves, hey, if we had Boyd and we had a healthy O-line, we'd come out of there with a comfortable victory. But then the other part that they're not giving proper credit to is, hey, if Mahomes is 100% healthy, that game's probably not the same way either. So, right. I mean, Mahomes would have been as limited, probably would have had some more legendary plays. And but I mean, this is, like you said earlier, Mahomes doing what he did today with everybody knowing where his ankle was at and some of the pain he was going through visibly that you could see on television or people that were there in person. Like, that built that legacy and that legend for him to this tough physical and mental guy to grit through it and to come back from the high ankle sprain, lead his team to the Super Bowl, all that stuff you add on to his legacy and that aspect to it. But I mean, like you said, we'll talk about it in the weeks ahead on the podcast, but like this game, I mean, I hate to say it this way, but I mean, like this is a game where like Mahomes kind of, if he gets that second Super Bowl win, like that locks in, like that cements him for quite some time as one of the great quarterbacks in this era, because there's not every quarterback wins 2 Super Bowls. So being able to do that's going to be huge for him. A chance, and for Andy Reid to be able to go against Philadelphia, for Brett Veach to go against Philadelphia, for Steve Spagnuolo to go against Philadelphia, Eric Bieniemy, Greg Lewis, all those guys. You can throw Donovan in there too, but he won't be coaching or on the field. But I mean, that
fighting in the press box though.
I don't know. I mean, he might be observing in the press box. I don't know. Part doesn't seem like the fighting type. And that's not meant as a knock. It's just he's a businessman, handles business.
That's fair. That's fair.
As he should. Like if he needs a box with his words, maybe that's how he goes about it. And really
verbal sparring.
But anyways, no, it's just like Andy put a lot of time into Philadelphia, and it didn't end well, and so like I mean, this is going to be really intriguing to see how this Super Bowl ends up going with the history that's there, and then obviously on the other end with Nick Sirianni and him formerly being a part of Todd Haley's staff when he was here in Kansas City. What?
Who?
Oh, you're talking about Todd Haley?
Yeah.
Okay. But anyways, yeah, I mean, with Nick Sirianni, and I can't remember if Dino is still their secondaries coach because he was with Kansas City a couple of years ago before they let him leave with Doug, if I remember correctly. But yeah, no, I mean, just all that. It's going to be really intriguing, and I'm kind of glad. I'm glad if it ends up working out in a win aspect of it, that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes got the redemption they needed or wanted a season later against the Bengals. And then if this kind of helps give that ultimate closure where Andy Reid goes out and wins the Super Bowl with the Eagles, then I it'll be really cool to see in that regard, because Andy Reid totally deserves it with everything he's done for this franchise and that franchise in Philly. Like, I mean, you want to see that guy be able to leave no doubt about where he is in terms of the fantastic coaches that are in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to think about it. If Mahomes and the Chiefs can win this, he'll have already matched Peyton Manning for Super Bowl titles, man.
Yeah.
Which is nutty to think about. But one thing that you mentioned earlier that I want to circle back to, you talked about the value for the rookies, getting this experience, understanding what it takes to get to this point, stuff like that. You've got to feel great for a guy like Carlos Dunlap, who's a 13-year
Right.
NFL veteran, had never even won a playoff game until last week, right? But he signed with the Chiefs, and he came to the Chiefs this year for this opportunity. And he's going to get that chance. And you talk about Andy Reid and his time with the Eagles and stuff like that. I promise you, not that guys need extra motivation or anything to lock in and stuff like that, but those guys love Andy in that locker room. And those guys know what playing against the Eagles will mean to him. Those guys are going to play their guts out for Andy Reid. I really believe that. And on top of that, like, the Chiefs know what it's like to win a Super Bowl, but a year later, they also found out what it's like to lose a Super Bowl. And then they found out what it's like to come up short. And I think they understand, because of that experience the last couple of years. I think they understand, more than any team in the NFL right now, how precious these moments are, how rare these opportunities are, how hard it is to put yourself in this position, and how you can't afford to let it slip. I mean, we all kind of know the way, things just kind of unraveled from an injury standpoint and off the field before Super Bowl 55, and the 31-9 debacle against Tampa Bay. I think this team's going to be locked in, and I think there's a good chance that there's going to be a lot of chatter about how, the Chiefs, they're going to struggle to stop the run. Do they have any answers for, A.J. Brown and Hurts and all this stuff? And I hope that a lot of people pick against them, because I think the Chiefs will feed off that. I hope that it becomes trendy for people to be like, oh, this is that the Eagles are the trendy pick, because I think that'll just irritate the Chiefs a little bit more.
Yeah, no, it depends on what's said by the opponent. So, I mean, that'll play a big part into that, because
I just hope like the national media is just on the Eagles.
Oh yeah, no, I think that'll be possible. But yeah, no, like you said, I mean, for Carlos Dunlap to get not only his first postseason win, but then also to play in a championship game, be a part of a winning team of a championship game, and get to play in a Super Bowl now. Like, he signed up for what he dreamed of happening, and it happened.
Right.
And Juju Smith-Schuster, I believe that was last week, was the first postseason game he'd won, if I remember correctly. And
Probably.
I think that's what he said at the podium this week. And I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, wow. One guy. Yeah, because he's been in the league 5 years already. You're just not used to, something like that with the organization he's part of, with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, yeah, I mean, that all that combined, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm very intrigued to see what happens, but I'm kind of also hoping what Mahomes' performance did tonight, I'm hoping that lets some of the veteran players from around the league that are kind of, should I sign with the Chiefs on a 1-year deal down the road here, or should I do this or do that? Do I really want to go chase that ring? I'm hoping that kind of was like its own little 4-hour sales pitch about why you should join the Kansas City Chiefs because, hey, they've been to 5 already. You can come apart and help make it 6.
I mean, I don't want to be accused of tampering or anything, but I also hope it,
Well, you'd have to be part of an NFL organization.
Right, I know. It was meant to be a joke, sir. But I remember a certain NFL wide receiver, or Minnesota Vikings wide receiver, who was once considered the best player in the game, and then he decided he wanted to go chase a ring with New England. And I'm just saying, if Justin Jefferson decides he wants to go play for an elite NFL quarterback and chase a ring, I think that he would be a welcome addition to the Chiefs roster in a few years down the road. I want to speak it into existence now. But I also, one other thing, speaking of wide receivers, one other thing I wanted to highlight was, if you remember earlier in the week, the Bengals did a really petty thing. The Chiefs were trying to create space for Jody Fortson or Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It ended up being Fortson. So they waived Chris Lamons, who had their most special team snaps of anybody on the Chiefs this season. And I think it was pretty transparent that the idea, and Andy said, Veach had a plan there. It's pretty transparent. The idea was bring him back on the practice squad, use a standard elevation the next couple weeks, sneak him through, and keep him around that way. And instead, the Bengals, in what I found to be a little bit of a petty move of gamesmanship, put in a waiver claim for Chris Lamons, effectively ending his season. But in doing so, that pretty much forced the Chiefs to activate Marcus Kemp. And they ended up needing a receiver because they were down 4 when Tony Hardman, Juju Smith-Schuster were all hurt and Justin Watson was inactive. And he ended up having, Kemp did what he normally does on special teams and had a big 13-yard catch late in the game. And I was just kind of cracking up at the way that it worked out, and Marcus Kemp's journey with the Chiefs kind of coming full circle and now heading back to another Super Bowl. He's a great guy, and it was great to see that it worked out the way that it should have for Marcus Kemp there.
Yeah, well, and then like you're talking special teams there, I mean, for Sky Moore to get the redemption that he did with the crucial return that he had that helped kind of set up that game-winning field goal, and for Harrison Butker and Tommy Townsend and James Winchester and their mechanics on the snaps and how consistent they've been in the playoffs on field goals and extra points. I mean, that was another redemption thing where Dave Toub's he's gonna strut a little bit out there around there now about it.
Oh, so he came up the tunnel after the ceremony, and we were already down there waiting to go to the locker room, and Dave Toub made a point to come over to the kid, the local media contingent and a group of beat writers that were over there, and mention, how about that Sky Moore punt return? But I talked to Sky after the game, and he said, look, I had to remind myself who I was and why I was there, and that I was trying something new and I was going to take bumps and bruises doing it.
Right.
But he said that Dave Toub and assistant special teams coach Andy Hill, who's a wonderful guy, I got to know him back when he was an assistant at Mizzou for years. He said those two guys just kept encouraging him and kept throwing him back there, kept making him practice and stuff like that. But he admitted, he's like, dude, I was like 5th on the depth chart. He goes, I didn't think I was going to return another punt this season. He said, but, when Tony was already out and Watson was out and McDuffie hasn't actually been practicing, returns. He said, then when McColl goes down, I knew it was my turn, but he wasn't scared. He went back there and he just did it with confidence, tried not to think about, the issues he'd had before. And he made arguably the biggest play of the game, because, you don't want that to come down to a coin flip in overtime and for the defense to have to make another play again. So, that flipped the field and really changed what the Chiefs were able to do on that drive with 30 seconds. And it was huge, man. It was huge. Absolutely huge.
Yeah. And one of the final points that I probably really have is that I don't know. I find it, I'm curious what Tyreek Hill's thinking right now. with them going back to another Super Bowl. I'm curious what he's thinking. And I'm also just kind of curious what the rest of the AFC West and the AFC is thinking as well. Like the Bills were like, hey, we went out and did all these things. And we lost to the Bengals and didn't even get the chance to play the Chiefs. Or, and they're sitting at home 2 weeks earlier than they wanted to be. And for the AFC West to bring it the way that they did, and for this to be a reloading type of year or rebuilding type of year, as it had been hinted by various people, that the Chiefs would take a step back and all that type of stuff, and for them to have the doubts that they dealt with, that they had, and everything, and just the roster construction that they put together, where people doubted the construction or the puzzle pieces, the way they were putting them together, for the Chiefs to potentially, quote unquote, be in a rebuilding year and go back to a Super Bowl. Like, I mean, I wish a lot of home renovation projects could go that swimmingly. And, Brett Veach, obviously him talking up there at the podium and everything, and, mentioning about it in the plan and everything, and staying true to it and that aspect of it. I mean, that's another part of this, giving people their recognition or their due that they deserve. I mean, the Chiefs front office is another aspect of that deserves that due, to make a tough decision on Tyreek Hill and then go out and draft all those players, and all of them have those rookies, and have them, and the veterans that they signed to all have key moments. Valdez-Scantling signing him after they traded Tyreek has, some crucial moments in that playoff game. Juju, this past season, and then all those rookies, and just how far Pacheco's come, and, just all that stuff combined. I mean, that's, I don't know. It's just fascinating to see. I'll be curious to see, regardless of how the Super Bowl goes, I'm going to be really curious to see what this roster potentially looks like next year when they try to, hopefully try to go back again.
Yeah. And I think it's worth also pointing out, this is a front office that lost Ryan Poles to a GM job to the Bears, but you look at the job they did in the draft. Brett Veach deserves an awful lot of credit. And I think the Chiefs are very lucky, but it also highlights, we talked in the past during the offseason. I joke about the Chiefs signing Justin Jefferson. If in a rebuilding year, the Chiefs can be 16-3, tied with the Eagles for the best record in the NFL and heading back to a Super Bowl, I think there's going to be a chance for one of those years, like when Brady and Moss hooked up, and were it not for Spagnuolo, and the New York Giants and the helmet catch from Eli Manning to David Tyree, you might be, you might have had an undefeated season there with Tom Brady and the Patriots. I think that there will be a time the Chiefs have that opportunity, and boy, that's going to be special too. But we'll worry about that down the road. We'll focus instead, on the Eagles, and this opportunity before them in the coming weeks.
Yeah, don't worry, we got plenty of time. Yeah, 2 whole weeks.
I feel like the week after the AFC Championship games, and then like the 13 days before you get to Super Bowl Sunday, is just the longest stretch of the NFL calendar, man.
Well, don't worry about it, Todd, because the Pro Bowl will have its skills challenge. You can watch the East-West Shrine game, and then the Senior Bowls this weekend as well. So, I mean, you got all.
I look forward to seeing how Joe Burrow does in that 7-on-7 competition.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
I mean, so will they call it Burrowhead West?
I don't know. I don't know, Todd. It's almost, it is almost 3:30 in the morning, and I've been up since 6 a.m. So.
At Burrowhead West. By the way, I was very proud of myself. I said, Joe added an L to his name, so he came to Burrowhead as Joe Burrow, and he leaves as Joel, because we got to tack on a big old L on the end of that one.
Yeah, I mean, at least you tried. At least you tried, Todd.
You're just mad you didn't think of it first, Nick.
I promise you that's not it.
All right. Well, hey, I just last thing I want to do is acknowledge Therese Peller would have turned 39 yesterday, and I would have loved to hear him laugh about the fifth down and some of the stuff that happened in that game. So
yeah, I don't think when you say the word fifth down, I don't think that conjures up the type of memories of what happened on the field today with officiating. Oh, the other thing I will say, somebody else, obviously, other than thinking about Therese this weekend, and it would have been his 39th birthday. Yes, the other part is a guy I felt bad for was Joseph Asai on the Bengals. It was like just how torn up he was about it, and you could tell how guilty he felt about that moment in time when he pushed Mahomes out of bounds and got a roughing the passer late hit or whatever they end up calling. I can't remember. I knew it was going to be 15 either way, but just how devastated he was and how I can tell he felt like he let his teammates down, let his team down, and then in the locker room he handled the questions and did the best he could, and thankfully he had a teammate there to kind of help shield with it. I believe it was BJ Hill that kind of helped shield that to a certain extent. So I don't know. I mean, I hope that guy gets to I hope Asai gets to a good place to where he understands that there were a lot of other plays in that game that didn't. It's not his fault. He isn't the sole reason they're not going to the Super Bowl. Like I just hope he kind of accepts that, and I really hope that Bengals fans don't try to blame him for it. But I got a feeling there will be a pocket that will, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, you got to hope for that young man that he can treat that moment much like Chris Jones treated last year, not being able to get the sack in a crucial moment against Joe Burrow. Use it as motivation, use it as a way to challenge yourself and hey, by the way, congratulations to Chris Jones, who got not one but two sacks in this one after not having any of his first 11 career postseason games. When I asked him about it afterwards, he said that y'all, meaning the media, make a much bigger deal about it. But then, like, as he finished that up, he said something about not having any sacks in 11 games. And I was like, see, he knows exactly what that was. Like, I know he's not out there stat chasing, but it's got to feel good that he won't ever have to answer questions about why he doesn't have a postseason sack again.
Yeah, and he also, he posted stuff on social media during the spring and summer. He brought it up a couple of times. Like the media never would have brought it up if he didn't put it out there like that to try to find the meaning behind it. So I mean, you could, whatever. I'm just gonna say whatever to that.
Yeah, no. I mean, look, I thought it was look. Chris and I exchanged some smiles back and forth. I
wondered at the time when I saw the two teddy bears on his shirt.
Yeah.
I just wondered if that was based on the amount of sacks that he had against Burrow, since it was.
It was. Yeah. That is my assumption, is that it was one teddy bear, two teddy bear.
So I wonder how many teddy bears he had in his locker for depending on how the game went.
Yeah, 4 just in case. So, although it is Arrowhead, maybe he's got to have 6, 7 if he's going after DT's record.
Yeah. Well, Todd, I'm tired.
Yeah. Hey, well, let's wrap this up before 3:20. So, Nick, I appreciate your time. Look forward to your work this week on the Road to Arizona shows. And for the rest of you guys, get some sleep and take care, kids.